I want to ask you about the budget bill because the Senate parliamentarian, by taking some of these measures out from a reconciliation process, has in effect taken away some of the Republicans' pay-fors, right, for not just extending the 2017 tax cuts, but adding other ones like no taxes on tips, et cetera. Right. As you know, the CBO already estimated that the bill in its previous form, the House-passed form, would add $2.8 trillion to the deficit over the course of 10 years. Are you comfortable voting for a bill that would add more, given some of these pay-fors are taken away?
Well, let me just say that this is actually one of the biggest tax cuts for the working class Americans and for our middle class. We know that TCJA, the Tax Cut Jobs Act, if that sunsets, is going to take our corporations and small businesses from a 21% to a 43.4% tax hike. That is a massive, massive break. That would actually hurt and cripple many of these businesses. We know that there are things that we could actually sharpen a little bit more. Could we make more cuts? Sure, I'm all for making more cuts. But we can't cut our way to prosperity in this, Jim. We have to grow our way out of it. That's why we have to give enough liquidity, market capabilities, and we have to go ahead and invest in American innovation, American industry, and the American workers so that we can actually go ahead and grow our GDP at a ratio of 3.5% that allows our GDP to national debt ratio to invert. That's the key here. We can't cut our way to prosperity. We have to grow as a country. We have to stop being less reliant on adversarial nations, and we have to start building America and serving America.
I get that argument, but to repeat the question, as you know, the debt is already at about 130%, I think I have that right, of U.S.
Correct.
GDP. Are you comfortable with that number rising?
Of course I'm not
to, as you
comfortable
say,
with that
invest
rising.
in America?
But we have to go ahead and try and understand. Look, I'm the one that's been arguing and flying the red flag for a while, which is that there's only 28 empires and nations in the world's history who's exceeded a 130% GDP. One of those was the Roman Empire, who was also a republic, who couldn't serve its debts any longer, not because of its failure of military expansionism. I understand the threat of a growing deficit. I would say that our national debt is one of our greatest existential threats in America. But you cannot cut your way to prosperity at this current rate. Any business owner will tell you, I have to have more revenue, I have to have more business in the door. This allows us to be able to go ahead and protect businesses, get less in the federal government's hands, and start handing things back to the states and individuals as our 10th Amendment was intended. So if you really want to go back to the actual problem of this, I would go to 1913, the ratification of the 16th, 17th Amendment of Woodrow Wilson. But what I can tell you is that this president is a negotiator and a businessman. We're going to grow our way out of this with American businesses, American industry, and American oil and gas.
Listen, well, you and I are both fellow fans of history, and I've made the comparison to the Roman Empire myself, so I appreciate the comparison. But before we go, I do want to ask about the cuts to Medicaid, because as you know, many of your Republican colleagues, including in the Senate, Susan Collins, Josh Hawley, are saying this is going to hurt people. It's going to close rural hospitals. Are you comfortable with those significant cuts to Medicaid?
Look, I came from a family where it was a broken home that I was adopted by my grandparents. My grandparents were extremely dependent upon Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and when my grandfather had quadruple bypass, we were dependent upon disability to try and get by. We were that lower to middle class family. My grandfather was a welder. My grandmother was a stay-at-home mom and cosmetologist. I know the importance of Medicare and Medicaid. No, I do not want to see any impacts to that. That's why I actually, in the 118th Congress, signed on to Beth Van Dyne's bill, which actually protect and save Medicare and Medicaid. So, no, I'm not happy about the cuts. I want to see what the final product is after the debates, but it's one of those things where we want to continue to serve and protect the American people.
President Trump's domestic policy agenda hitting a major setback. The Senate parliamentarian, essentially the chamber's rules referee, struck down key provisions of his so-called big, beautiful bill, saying they don't meet the strict standards to pass by a simple majority of 51 votes. That includes major changes to Medicaid. And it puts the president's deadline to sign the bill by July 4th, just a week from now, of course, in jeopardy. CNN's Jeff Zeleny is at the White House this morning for us, I hope. Jeff, there you are. President Trump held an event to make his case, to try to push this bill through. But what are you learning? Because there is a lot of jostling going on and a lot of concern, particularly among Republicans.
Hey, good morning, Sarah. We are here at the White House. President Trump is as well, and we are learning he is planning to spend the weekend here in Washington, a rare weekend in Washington, because he wants to stay close to the Senate as he is urging and pushing Senate Republicans to pass his sweeping tax and spending bill. It's really the signature piece of legislation that really touches every corner of American lives. There's no question, though, there are some hurdles. You mentioned the referee in the Senate. That's the Senate parliamentarian. They are ruling that many of the key provisions are out of order. So it's back to the drawing board for some of these key provisions on Medicaid spending that really have a deep impact on rural hospitals and many other programs. But the president had an event here at the White House late yesterday. He had this to say about any Republican holdouts.
I shouldn't say this, but we don't want to have grandstanders where one or two people raise their vote. We don't know. And they do it to grandstand, that's all. Not good people. They know who I'm talking about. I call them out. But we don't need grandstanders.
What may be grandstanding to the president are actually deep policy differences to many of the Republicans in his own party. The bottom line is right now Senate Republicans do not have the 50 votes they need because of some of those key provisions on Medicaid cuts. You can see right there. Several other things are also in this, but the debt ceiling increase, that is one huge part of all of this. That is needed. But the reason for all of these cuts to many safety net programs is to find enough revenue to extend the Trump tax cuts. So that is what is at issue here, Sarah. There's no question this will pass at some point. Obviously, Republicans control the Senate as well as the House. But once the Senate does pass it, it has to go back to the House to approve all these changes. So there are many tough days ahead, and it's unclear if they will meet the president's July 4th deadline.
You've been doing some great reporting on just how these Medicaid cuts could directly affect families. What did you learn?
Sir, we often talk about Medicaid cuts here in the aggregate, but we spent some time in Missouri, obviously a red state, but where these Medicaid cuts are having deep effects on people's lives. There is real concern. We met a mother named Courtney Leader, whose 9-year-old daughter Serena depends on Medicaid funding, and she explained why.
It's not a luxury. This is not a luxury thing. Like I do not have my daughter enrolled on Medicaid so that we can have fancy things. I have my daughter enrolled in Medicaid so that we can keep her alive.
So this is just one of the many stories we heard, and we'll bring more of that to you in the next hour. But it's one of the reasons Republican Senator from Missouri, Josh Hawley, is one of the Republican senators who are raising objections to this. So what the president calls grandstanding actually has real-world effects on people's lives. But
we will dive right in, beginning with Republicans now facing a major setback after a Senate official ruled against a series of health care cuts and savings in their sweeping domestic policy bill. The nonpartisan Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough disqualified several provisions, including one that prohibits federal funding of Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program for adults or kids whose immigration status cannot be immediately verified, as well as changes in how states can tax Medicaid providers. Senate Majority Leader John Thune called the setback a, quote, speed bump, and told reporters that he has contingency plans in place. But Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama took a far harsher tone, calling for Thune to fire the parliamentarian ASAP. Others in the Senate called for her to be overruled, which can happen by a simple majority. But Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri threw some cold water on that idea.
Senator, do you think that the parliamentarian should remain in her job? Should you guys try to overrule the parliamentarian?
Oh, I just can't imagine that you'd get people to overrule her. I mean, I just don't think you get the votes for that. So, I just don't. I mean, I think Thune himself has said he wouldn't vote for that. So, I don't see that happening.
Well, President Trump has urged all congressional Republicans to get behind the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, warning any members of the GOP from voting against it. During an event at the White House yesterday, Trump said Americans would benefit from the tax cuts in the measure and that the bill would create millions of jobs and grow the economy, while also falsely stating it includes no taxes on Social Security benefits.
This is the ultimate codification of our agenda to, very simply, a phrase that's been used pretty well by me over the last 10 years, but maybe even before that, make America great again. Very simple, make America great again. We don't want to have grandstanders where one or two people raise their vote. We don't know. And they do it to grandstand, that's all. Not good people. They know who I'm talking about. I call them out. but we don't need grandstanders. We have to get our country back and bring it back strong. And our country is going to be stronger, bigger, better than ever before.
Stronger, bigger, better. One person that I've spoken to Democrats and Republicans about this bill, Gene, who was saying to me, well, one thing that they do think is that the Democrats' chances in the midterms are stronger, bigger and better if this bill passes as it is.
Absolutely. It's not a popular bill. I mean, it's not. There are provisions in this bill for, various groups to hate, for everybody to hate. There's something in there, and
make a bill that big.
Yeah,
there are probably going to be bits that everybody can hate.
This is literally more than a kitchen sink bill. Everything is in there. The entire legislative agenda of this Trump administration is in this one bill, and so of course there are members of the House and members of the Senate who don't like various provisions of this bill, even if and when they corral all the Republicans into supporting some version of this bill with this stripped and that stripped. I think they have a real problem going into the midterms. I really do.
I can't get over a couple things here. One is the process, which is they haven't finished writing this thing and they're going to vote tomorrow. They're still going to vote on it tomorrow. It's crazy to me I mean, there's not been a single hearing in this.
You can see that this is spilling back into the House. Guys, I said this was going to happen. Many of you were saying it too, probably even a little bit before I was, that this bill narrowly passed the House, right? We know that. I think Massey voted against it, but other than that, they basically got every Republican on board. That's the margins, right? They have like 2 or 3 votes to spare in the House. But we knew that with the Senate being for different reasons, some think the cuts are too harsh, some think they're not harsh enough, that this was gonna go back to the House, and immediately that very narrow path that they charted, it was always crumbling. And if they didn't have to go back to the House, maybe you could get something done. But in between the time that the bill left the House and is going to come back, people are pissed about it even more. We've talked about some examples of Republicans changing their mind. One prominent one being Marjorie Taylor Greene, who there was an AI gang. Remember, Marjorie didn't read the bill. She didn't, right? She voted without reading it. She got caught. But she's like, better late than never, I guess. This bill is going to make it so that the federal government will make any AI regulation impossible by the states, like at all. It's pretty concerning. So if a state wanted to, say, protect its healthcare industry from rogue AI or whatnot, they would not be allowed to do that, right? So for a lot of good reasons, she's right. That's enough to kill the bill. And so she's like, I'm out because of that. And now we have, again, the changes to the Medicare policy. In some cases, again, the cuts are still not extreme enough for some people in the House. But now with new efforts to make the cuts more harsh, but also because the cuts may be taken out by new rulings by the parliamentarian, people in the House are angry. The harsher cuts wanted by radical right-wing senators are angering some House Republicans. But the fact that the healthcare provisions may be taken out by the formulaic parliamentarian ruling angers Republicans who want the disastrous cuts. So the big, beautiful bill, it's already dead before it arrives back in the House.